All right, let's give this a shot then. All right, so go ahead and unzip that file that I've given you. So in this file, let me take a look at it myself real quick. Inside here, you should have 3 things. 2 Unreal assets, and then a couple PNGs, an image sequence that we're going to use. This has been keyed out and everything already, so we don't have to worry about that. Moving forward, starting next week, we're going to start talking about keying and removing things from the background. This is just a really, really short clip that's already been keyed out for you and already composited together in some levels that we're going to start building a world around. I like to start to use real world examples and provide you with files so that you can follow along. If you want to use your own stuff, that's absolutely fine. You should use your own stuff for the homework assignments. But essentially, we're going to build a world around this shot. We're going to do a lot of the same things that we've done in the previous 2 classes, but we're also going to start to introduce some new stuff today. This is a video compositing class. Today, we're just going to work with a still, okay? Keep it simple, because video complicates things. All right. So also, word of warning that this is a live demo. I'm kind of freestyling, so the potential for failure is quite high. But that's all right. We'll just bounce off and we'll go another direction. Okay? So let me tell you, or actually let me show you what this is going to kind of look like, or actually what I'm hoping that it looks like. So this is one scene from a music video I did a little bit back. I'm remote desktoping into my desktop computer in my studio, so it's a little slow. But essentially, Charlie XCX and Diplo here riding dolphins through hyperspace. This is all rendered in Unreal. They were shot on green screen, sitting on green, actually giant green painted terracotta planters. Believe it or not, I have an image of that. It's not green anymore because the green was removed, but big terracotta planters just to get their legs kind of splayed out to replace with dolphins. And we're going to put them back into a space world today. That's up to interpretation, however you want to do it. I've given you some files to kind of get the ball rolling, but if you want to put them somewhere else, that's absolutely cool as well. It's a little laggy here, so I'm having trouble showing you smoothly. While we're here, I think this is interesting to show maybe now, although this is something we're going to get into more later in the semester, more recompositing back into After Effects. So let's walk through this whole process. So they were filmed on green screen. They were keyed out of the background. I took them into Unreal kind of as a placeholder, bringing the video footage of them into Unreal as a placeholder to design and build a world around, right? So which direction things are going to happen in, what are they reacting to, starting to put the foreground and background elements in, all of this sort of stuff, and building the world around them. After that stuff was built, there's like a little asteroid that flies by here in the foreground. And then there's these hyperspace lights in the background. After this was all put together, it was rendered out as separate pieces in Unreal and then recompose it back together in After Effects. You can see there's a lot of compositions here in After Effects. If you know anything about After Effects, there's a lot of stuff going on here. These look like layers, but they're actually many layers inside of these individual compositions. For instance, if I click on Diplo's composition, there's actually a lot more happening here. There's the thing that's keying him out of the background. No, it's mostly just that, actually. It's just the thing that's keying him out of the background. And each of them has that piece. If I look at these individual pieces, there he is by himself. Now he's with Charlie. But what happens if let me go to a different frame. When they get composited onto these dolphins, you can't just slap them on top because you need to fit the dolphin fin in between their arms. So you almost need to layer multiple pieces. You have the pieces that are in the foreground that are on top of everything, like that asteroid that flies by, right? That's the top level of foreground. Then behind that, you have, let's just say, this arm on both of them actually, because that lays on top of the body of the dolphin. And then underneath that is the dolphin fin that is then covering up the rest of his body and her body. And then behind that is them, their green screen footage, and then behind them is the actual background, the rest of the dolphin, the tail of the dolphin, the part that they're sitting on, everything that's behind them, the light trails in the background, any asteroids in the background, all of those pieces come together to create this final composite. It's actually quite elaborate talking through it. There's a lot of different pieces, but all those things come together to create this final picture. And of course it's moving as well, so there's some tracking going on, but we're not going to get into that right now. Let me start to show you some of these other pieces. Here's just like his leg by itself, so that it can lay over top of the dolphin's body. Then I have, what is this? Oh, his shadow. Let me zoom in. Oops. It's tough because I'm on remote desktop, so it's zooming in on Mac, but not on my PC. Where's the background? There we go. So here's a shadow that I'm laying on top of the body of the dolphin. Let me try to zoom in a little bit. A little bit more. It's silly because he has no hand right now. I chopped it off. So there's that shadow. If I took these things all off, so everything's back on again, let me just take the shadow off by itself. So the shadow is just a tiny thing, but it's laid on top of the body so that it, gives a little bit of depth to things. If I start to pull back some of these other pieces, like his fingers, his leg, the rest of his body, now it's just the shadow of him. I take the shadow away. Now it's just the original dolphin by itself. So this dolphin was recorded out from Unreal as an asset. Then I had to basically cut this dolphin in half to allow it to lay on top of Diplo's body and also put it behind them. So there's a lot of layering that happens. And if you're familiar with any sort of compositing in Photoshop, it's a similar sort of thing, masking things out. Difficulty with video is that it moves, so you might need to animate your masks. This is something that we're going to revisit later in the semester when we start to actually render things out from Unreal and bring them back into After Effects. For our purposes today, we're just going to render everything in Unreal. We're going to composite in Unreal, and that's pretty much going to be it, right? That's going to be our final picture, is anything that we can do in Unreal. That's going to be a little limiting because the pieces aren't separated, meaning that we can't modify them individually as easily. But for our purposes today, that will be a good start. and help you set up for your assignment next week. Yeah, any questions before I move on from this? I know this is a little elaborate maybe to show right now, but I just want to get you thinking in the back of your head how pieces fit together. I show you real world examples because I can talk about them. I built them. I built this entire 3-minute music video in 4 weeks completely by myself. It was insane. But did it. Why did you do it by yourself? Well, because I wanted all the money for myself. Oops, what happened to his leg? Uh-oh. I also haven't opened this file in a little while, so I just clicked on things that I wasn't supposed to click on. Uh-oh. That's alright, I just won't save. Alright, don't save. Close. Close project. Later in the semester, I also want to look at using Resolve. I feel like I asked this earlier, but who uses Resolve for video editing or has before? Hardly anybody, but a couple people. So Resolve's on these computers. Resolve's also a lot better than Premiere in everything. It's also free and not owned by the evil overlords at Adobe. So I encourage you to check it out. It's just a hell of a lot faster at processing pretty much everything that it does. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but once you understand things, it's just a lot better. It's a lot better at compositing as well. So maybe we'll look at a little bit of Resolve later in the semester as well. But without wasting too much more time talking about that stuff, let's switch over to Unreal. So I'm going to open up a project, and like I said, today's going to be a lot of kind of just freestyling. I'm going to be winging it. I have an idea in my head. We want to put them riding the dolphins in space, right? That's my plan. And I have some assets in mind. I've given you some of those assets, but I'm not entirely sure how it's going to end up. So we're going to see how it goes. And I'm going to walk through it with you step by step. And this is going to show you how to, well, we've already talked about building worlds. I think you should all feel all right about that, although today is another great exercise. We're going to look at importing images today, still images for right now. We're going to import a PNG image in this case that's already been cut out of the background. But you will learn how to import textures today so that you can import photographs to build your world around for your assignment. And then, depending on how far we get, I'll show you how to perhaps render out foreground and background separately, but we will see how far we get. Today is a demo. I'm trying to record it. We'll see how that goes. But at any point, stop me and ask questions. If nobody stops me, I just keep going. I have a fairly good sense about what's difficult and what's not, but please, if you have questions, ask. Half the class has the same question. They're just too scared to ask. All right? So I gave you 2 more assets in that zip file. I gave you this advanced space shader and asteroid ore, which is like just glittery asteroids. If you have an asset that you want to put into a project not from the marketplace, I'm going to show you how to do that now. So if you go ahead and just shift select both of these assets, the folders, the unzipped folders of both of these, and you browse to your project, your Unreal project. I don't know where yours is. It might be on an external hard drive. It might be in the documents folder. I'm not sure. Mine is on my external hard drive, and I didn't rename it from the default name. It's called My Project. If we look in My Project, you're going to see the files in an Unreal project. This is all the folders that always get created in every Unreal project. This is also where your screenshots get saved if you're using the screenshot tool in Unreal. Saved folder. If you go into content folder, well, you're going to see I already have the asteroid and the space shader folder because I've already pasted mine in. Okay? But you're not going to see them in yours. So go ahead and paste them in. I also have a lot of other stuff in here that you won't have. It's from last week when we went shopping in the marketplace. If you go back to your Unreal Engine project, you should see all that stuff pop up. You shouldn't have to restart your project or anything. You might have to scroll down depending on how much stuff you have. Scroll down. Ensure you put it in another project. Kind of annoying on the Mac. It used to say the project name over here, but now it's hard to tell which project it actually is. Trouble navigating Macs. If you just right click on, say that folder for instance, you say, where's that? There's something that says like, yes, shelf right. That would darken like that. Should pop up. Did it pop up? Maybe restart the project. Did it pop up for anybody? It popped up here. Anybody else not popped up? Well, that's good. It sounds like single user failure then. Well, that's not my fault. Yeah. Zoom out. Okay. This is this is just the default landscape. This is the default project that we started. Default map. Yeah, blank landscape map. Well, sometimes this happens with what are called landscapes, which is the scenes with the topology of the mountains and stuff like that. Did you edit the landscape at all? Probably not. Okay. Let's try something tricky here. If you go to the selection mode and you go to landscape. You go to, what do you want to do? Yes, Alt and just sculpting. We're learning something unexpected. Nothing there. See, all these other parts have flaps for them. See, that's the thing. It could be anything. So,
was it something? Did you end up like deleting it?
What? Yeah. What was here? Was there a giant temple here or something?
I might. I went to like the press on the ground, and I couldn't figure out where's this. Where maybe that's.
I mean, there's literally nothing there.
Okay.
So somehow that got deleted. Either something was covering it up, or I highly doubt you went into the landscape mode and added. Oh, weird and raised up. That's strange. Whoa, that's weird. That's not working out for us. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. Somehow part of the world got deleted. The easy fix for it would be to just turn the camera away.
I didn't do that.
Okay? So if you ever have assets that you've downloaded from the marketplace and you want to get them into another project and you don't want to go through the library, the Epic Launcher, you can do it like this. If you're working in a team, you can share files this way. It goes without saying that we're breaking some copyright legalities doing stuff like this, but in an educational setting, I think that's okay.
Knock off the deposit.
Yep.
I think I didn't go through.
Huh?
Help me with it. Like, then go through.
What's the problem?
I only go.
Yeah, you're getting ahead of yourself. You gotta wait. So now that those are imported, I'm gonna start a completely new level here. I'm gonna go up to File, New Level, and I'm gonna get crazy. And I'm gonna say Empty Level. No lights, no world, no clouds, just infinite blackness. So much possibility. All right. That freaks me out. Good idea, thank you. So the way that we do this today, we're importing one frame of video into Unreal as a texture file, one PNG, right? After today, we're not going to be working with still pictures, unless, I don't know, that's your final project somehow. But going forward, we're going to be working with videos. Our videos are essentially just a bunch of still pictures, so we're just taking one frame. But I just want to say that the workflow that we're using today is not necessarily like the end when it comes to importing video. Actually, it's not how you import video at all. It's how you import textures, which we briefly went over last week when we made like a little smiley face in Photoshop. Beautiful smiley face. All right, so let's import one of the pictures. So if I go to import in the content browser, browse to wherever you unzipped those files. It's up to you which one you want to pick. There's some that look better than others because some have like weird eyes closed moments. Everybody kind of looks dumb when you pause the film. Also, I wouldn't pick the very first one that has the weird asteroid in it. I'm going to pick frame 6. Frame 6 looks like a good in-between. And I'm going to click open. I'm not importing all of them because I'm not doing video. I'm just bringing one in.
Wait, where did you find the spicy footage? In which folder?
It should be in the full unfolder that you unzipped, the 4 folder,
Yeah.
called spicy footage. You could also just drag the PNG files in. Why PNG file?
Transparent.
It's transparent. Exactly. If I double click on it, the color's a little weird when I double click on it, but you can see that it has transparency, which is what I want, right? This background was already removed in After Effects when it was rendered out. If you want to remove a background in Photoshop, you could do that for a still picture. Anything that removes a background, it doesn't really matter. But that alpha channel is getting saved into the PNG because PNGs can hold alpha channels. JPEGs cannot have transparency. So you could use a JPEG if you didn't want a transparent background. Going forward, when we move on to video, we could bring in an image sequence of PNGs with transparent backgrounds, but eventually we're going to use what are called EXR files in here. EXR files are quite large, uncompressed VFX files that Unreal likes to use and other softwares like to use and can process really quickly. All right, I'm going to close this window down. A friendly reminder that when an asset has the little asterisks on it, like this right here, that means that it's not saved. So if my computer was to crash right now, I would have to re-import this image. Not that big of a deal, but what if I worked on it and did some stuff? Then it would be a real bad thing, right? If I click Save All in the content browser or in the file menu, it will save that file. It's probably going to ask you to save the map as well, save the level. Maybe not. All right, step number 2. We got to create a material from this texture. Easiest way to do that would be to right-click on the texture in your content browser, and this big, huge menu that pops up top, it says Create Material. Remember, materials are the paint that we put on objects in our world. Textures are sort of like the pigments that make up the paint. I'm just going to call this M_spicy. Naming conventions. That's good. Now you can see they get wrapped around like a sphere here. Okay? Cool. Now you just watch for a second. I'm just going to quickly drag some stuff into my world. I'm going to delete all this in a second. I just want to show you that now I can put this on things in my world. Hooray, they are on cubes, right? No transparent background though, because I haven't set it up. Okay, let me show you how to set it up. Oops. If yours is completely black and you don't see anything, change your view mode up here from lit to unlit. And then you will see without any lights. Also, you could just be like wandering the infinite void somewhere and lost because you have no orientation. If that's the case, go over to your outliner and double click on something and it should take you back home to something that you can see. Okay? I'm still setting up this material. I need to get the transparency back into it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on the material, which is the green one in the content browser. It says material at the bottom. Now we could spend years talking about materials in Unreal, but we are only going to talk about them in depth very briefly in this class. So anytime that you have a texture that you want to add transparency to, we need to do some things here. So just check out what I'm going to do. All of these little nodes here correspond to different things. We have the R channel, the green channel, the blue channel. We have an alpha channel right here. I want to take this alpha channel and drag it to opacity. Notice that opacity is grayed out right now. That's okay. We're going to fix that. If you click on the big main node here, and you go over to the left side, if you don't see this stuff, it's because you didn't click on the big main node. You go over to the left side and you change the blend mode from opaque to translucent. You should see that the background has now become translucent. It looks pretty cool wrapped around a sphere like this.
Can you do that one more?
Sure. So let me start from scratch. So see, if you click and hold, you can drag and see around. You can also change the shape of these things with these little buttons down here if you just want to see them on a plane or something like that. So they have a solid background, right? If I drag from the alpha channel to opacity, yours is going to be grayed out unless you already did it. And then you click on the big main node, and you go over to the details over here on the left, and you set blend mode from opaque to translucent. This is telling the material that it has an alpha channel, to expect an alpha channel. Most materials in Unreal are opaque. They're not see-through, right? Translucent and masked materials are actually fairly more expensive computationally. So we don't just go around making everything translucent. It's unnecessary. So translucent. And when you do that, you should see that it is it's like a stencil now. Right? If I hold down and zoom around the back, see that it disappears when I turn the plane around. This is not always a problem, but it can be a little bit disorienting to people that are new to Unreal. You're flying around the world and, oh no, I can't see my picture anymore. Or maybe you drag the material into the world and it just got applied to the inside or the back side of the thing that you were putting it on, and it can be a little confusing. One easy way to solve that, it's really easy. If you click down here where it says two-sided, this makes your material two-sided. Now if I turn this around, I see it on both sides. 99.999% of the time, you don't need materials to be two-sided because you're only ever going to see them from one side, right? If I walk around this room, this wall right here, this table, I only ever see the one side of this. I can't put my head through this wall and look at it from the other side, right? It doesn't need to be two-sided. The closest real-world approximation of something that would be two-sided would be like a window, a piece of glass, right? If we had a piece of glass in a game on a flat plane, and we could look at the outside and the inside, you could walk through the house and look at the outside and walk in the house and look at the inside. That's something where you would want it to be two-sided, right? Or you would need to put two planes that have one-sided materials facing outside that way. A lot of different ways to do the same thing. I just show you this because I know this problem will pop up and they're like, oh, I can't see my material. Where's it at? It's only on one side. This is how you fix it. Okay? This is simple Unreal stuff here. Just good to know. Go ahead and click the little floppy disk icon up top to save. Just notice it has the asterisk up here too. Oh, it disappeared just now. And you can close this down. Oh, now it looks crazy. Because all 6 sides of my cubes have transparency. That's fun. This is just a demonstration to show transparency. We're going to delete these in a second here. Everybody able to get to this point? Okay. Which part?
Never mind, I figured it out now.
Good job.
Thank you.
Don't panic. It's all right. All right, I'm going to go ahead and delete these cubes now because they're not really part of my world. I was just using them as a demonstration. At the end of last class, we looked very quickly at cameras in Unreal. I want you to put a Cin camera actor in your world, which is in the little slate icon and then down where it says Cin camera actor. If you don't have this menu, place actors, you can get it from window, place actors. I always like to have the place actors window open all the time. So I'm going to drag camera actor in, and it's a little weird because there's no world, right? It's a little hard to imagine what's happening here. You don't have to do this in an empty world. I just did it to stress you out and make you uncomfortable. But I'm dragging a camera into my world. And rather than placing something in front of my camera, I'm going to do something a little different this time. I'm going to create what's called an image plate. It's essentially a flat plane that is stuck to my camera. Imagine I'm the camera, right? Extruded from me is a flat plane. Anywhere me, the camera goes, the plane goes with the texture on it. So I have a texture attached to me, right? Rather than placing this in the world and then on the camera I can drive around. The advantage of something like this is that, remember, we're working with flat pieces of art, right? If I were to drive my camera over here, I start to see weird perspective on it. If I drive it really extreme, I start to see the edge of things, right? If the plane is attached to the camera, it's always going to be flat and straight on with the camera. So you can't mess it up. Now, you can still independently move the camera and move it around and kind of get a little fake movement if you want. But I show you this because our concentration should be less on the image and more on the world building. What kind of weird thing are you in? What the heck? This is not on Unreal Engine problems. No. Are you not? Was that always like this, or did it just happen all of a sudden? I think it's because maybe you had a save prompt up, and it was hidden behind the window, but it's still not here. Load layout. Default editor. I just went to, yeah. Must have something. I don't want to blame you, but something happened. But anyways, to fix that, I just went to load layout and default. Erase any problems that happened. All right, so we're going to create a image plate. This is kind of a manual image plate. There is something that's actually called an image plate in Unreal that's a little bit different, but we're just going to make our own. Okay. So I have my camera in my world. It's right here. It's weird colored because I'm in unlit mode. So remember, I haven't put any lights in my world or anything yet. If I go over to the right side when I'm clicked on my camera, notice there's a green add button here. Inside of actors, you can add what are called components to them. They're kind of like little child actors that get attached to the parent actor. So I'm going to add, click the add button, I'm going to add a plane. There's a long list of stuff that you can add onto here. And this is actually a good core concept to know about Unreal. Components can be added to actors with this little green add button. We're using this to add a plane to our camera. So I'm going to click plane. Now notice down here now, plane got added to it. So if I want to look at the details of the plane, I need to click on it. If I want to look at the details of the camera, I need to click on the camera. Core concept to Unreal, maybe a little bit confusing to some, but just know that you can click between these things. If you can't see them, it's because this window is crunched down too much. Make it bigger.
Is it the same like parenting and After Effects?
Similar. It's the same in the sense that it moves where the other one moves, but there's a lot of functionality in here in these components that it's less about like a physical object and more like coding related. So let's just say yes for now. So look at this. Now I have a plane kind of bisecting my camera here, right? If I select this plane, I could start to rotate it using, the keys that we've used before to modify the world. You can hit the space bar to get the translation tools. Essentially, what I want you to do is rotate it and push it away from your camera a little bit. And if you're really feeling ready, go ahead and just drag the material on top of it. Whoop. Better way to drag the material on top of it would not be just drag it in the world, because it's going to put it on the camera too, which is pretty funny. Now my camera has dolphin wallpaper on it. The better way to do that would be to select the plane, and then in the details for it right here, where it says materials, drag the material to the little white circle down in the bottom right. Then it will just go on that child's component, that plane. Question? Every time that you click on a camera, this window pops up. So I would just zoom out a little bit so that pull down that foot and rotate yourself down. So you can see. Just pull down that foot. Just drag yourself out. Yeah. We're going to add light in a second so it doesn't look like we're just staring into the black of this. It's a little disorienting, I know, but I want to make you uncomfortable. It is attached to the camera. You want to put the image on it. Right. So don't do it that way, because it's going to put it on everything. So click on the plane there, and see this is where the materials are. So if you drag from the content browser here, or you can search for it there, which is a lot of different ways to do something. Put it on there, because then it will just go on the plane and not the camera. Well, this looks great too. All right. Also, when you're ready, let's just go ahead and add a directional light to your world too, in the light section. And just drag the directional light in anywhere. And get out of unlit mode and go into lit mode. That should make it a little bit easier to stomach. So looking at my camera view in the bottom right there, the plane looks stretched and also it needs to be rotated. So I'm going to go and rotate that plane so it looks a little bit better. Oops. And essentially what I want you to end up with is a camera view that basically looks like this, with them somewhere in the camera view, right side up. Okay? Now one other thing to notice is they're squashed. Right? They look a little squished, right? The reason that they're squished is because look at the size of my plane. It's a square, right? And if we look at the aspect ratio of my image, it's 16:9. So it's taking that 16:9 image and squashing it into a square. two ways that you could fix something like this. You could make your image square, so you could put borders on it, more transparency. The other way that you could fix it is just change the size of the plane to something that is 16:9 equivalent. So let me show you that. So right now, if I look at my plane, you see the scale is 1:1. It's a square. But if I changed it to, what axes am I dealing with here? I'm dealing with X, the red one, for width, and Y, the green one, for height. Yours might be the same or not. So I'm just going to make this 16:9, or yeah, I'll make it 16:9 actually. Now the image is going to get really huge. And now see, the image is a lot bigger than my camera, so I'm going to have to push it back farther away from my camera. You could also do 1.6, 0.9. You could do 32:18, whatever proportion is equivalent to 16:9. Now they don't look squashed anymore. I picked 16:9 rather than 1.6, 0.9 because it's better to work with a bigger world. Otherwise, your apertures are going to be like 0.01 f-stop. Really, your whole world is going to be basically within the camera lens. It's going to be really tiny. So it's better to work with a larger world. You have more control over things like focus and stuff. All right, I know this big black world is a little scary for people, so why don't we put something in there that makes things a little bit easier to navigate? So I'm going to use this asset called Advanced Space Shader, and there's a blueprint folder, and I'm going to go in the blueprint folder, and I recommend picking either a space sphere or star field. I'm going to pick star field just to keep it simple. Actually, you know what? I'm going to pick space sphere instead, because this will allow us to see something else. So now it's a little easier to understand what side's up and down. But you may notice that everything got really orange or red. That's okay. We'll solve this problem. We'll also design our world to be a little bit more interesting momentarily. So first things first is, I got this error message that's telling me I have multiple directional lights. The only reason I got this is because this space sphere that I dragged in here actually comes bundled with a directional light. So in order to get rid of this error and solve any sort of problems that I have, I'm going to delete the directional light that I made a couple minutes ago. And that error should disappear. So the directional light is being created by the sun in this asset, actually, which makes sense. You know, the light should be cast from the sun. And if you play around with the sun sphere or the space sphere, there's all sorts of crazy settings that you can do. Does it have a sun? Yes or no? What is the color of the sun? What is the brightness? What is its rotation? What is the scale? Is there gas clouds? What are their color? How big are they? Is there a star field? There's a whole bunch of settings that you can play around with. I'm not going to play around with those right now. But I am going to show you how to do something else. So everything looks really blown out for me. I don't know if this is true for everybody, but it is for me. Also, my texture my video footage here, I guess it's not video footage, my frame of video footage is all kind of weird yellow colored and stuff. Which makes sense because it's in a weird yellow colored world. But usually you don't want your photos or video to be colored by the world. You want to do that coloring in post-production, or maybe you did it on set when you shot that footage, right? I want to turn that off on that material. So if I go back to the material that I created for them when I brought them in, if I go back to the material that I created and I double click it, remember this is where we set up the opacity. And if you're lost and you can't find it, an easy way to find it would be to click on the plane in your camera, then scroll down. Actually, you don't even have to scroll, just the materials section for that actor, and it's right there. Just double click on it. Right now, I'm using a material that is normally lit. It's not an unlit texture. It's not a emissive texture. It's just taking light, which is why when we had no lights in our world, we couldn't see it, right? It needs to be illuminated. I want to make this an unlit texture. So if I click on this big node over here, like we did when we did the transparency, and I go over to the left, and I change this from shading model default lit to unlit, you should see everything turns black, and also base color gets grayed out, and then emissive color is the only one left. We want the RGB to go into emissive color now. We're basically telling Unreal not to let light affect this material and just have it be how it is in the original file. So set that to emissive color and then set the shading model to unlit. If you want it to be lit by the world, then don't do this. But this is how you get the color back in the original file. Go ahead and click Save. Now you might notice that it's a little washed out and stuff. I'll show you how to fix that as well in a second. So now it's not orange anymore, but it is very washed out. The reason that it's washed out is because Unreal is using its auto exposure system to brighten everything up. I'm in space. Space is black. The exposure needs to be cranked up, and when it's being cranked up, it's overexposing the video footage of them riding the dolphins. So it looks pretty crappy, right? Don't do this, but I'm going to show you really quick if I was to manually change the exposure. If I manually change the exposure here, now they look okay, maybe a little dark, but maybe the background's a little too dark. I'm going to show you how to turn auto exposure off in Unreal. The auto exposure system in Unreal is called eye adaptation. We have eye adaptation. We sit in a movie theater for a couple hours, we watch a movie in the dark, we go outside, it's the middle of the day, oh, you're overwhelmed with light, it's really bright, right? But then eventually your eyes adjust. Same thing just happened there. You see it gradually brighten up in Unreal. Something like this, watch when I go back to game setting, see it gradually brighten up. Something like this is really cool in games. You're in a house with your weapon, you come out into the beautiful environment where it's a bright sunny day. It takes a second to catch up to speed. Not so great when we're making films. So we have to turn this off. Let me show you how to turn it off. The sorts of things that we're doing right now are common things that you have to do for pretty much every project. We're going to make what's called a post-processing volume right now to turn off auto exposure. So the post-processing volume is in It's in visual effects. It's in the stars one, in the place actors menu. And it's right up top. It should be right up top, post-process volume. If you drag that into your worlds, it really doesn't matter in our case. Drag that into your world, select it, and there's a couple things that I want you to change. Post-process volume, in our case, we're going to just have it affect the entire world. In Unreal, post-process volumes act as basically rooms where if I walk into a post-process volume, I can change the exposure, I can change the level of grain in the world, I can change the colors and the hue of things. They're basically little zones around the map as your character walks into them. In our case, we're just going to have it affect everything because we're making a film. Remember, this is a gaming engine, so there's a lot of gaming stuff that we have to work around. So post-process volume, with that selected, I want you to scroll down through all these settings until you find one called Infinite Extent Unbound. You can also just type this in the search button. Check that. What this means is that instead of having to be in the box for these settings to apply, now it affects everything, which is what we want. So after we select Infinite Extent Unbound, now we have to tell Unreal what it is that we want to do. So we're going to scroll back up to Exposure. And see it's currently set right now, Auto Exposure Histogram. I'm going to click this checkbox next to Metering Mode, and I'm going to change this from Auto Exposure to Manual. Now everything should go dark, or dark-ish, or darker. And now, you can play around with the exposure compensation to make them look good. You know, this is a photography program, so if you wanted to be crazy, you could click this box that says Apply Physical Camera Exposure. So now you could actually work with proper aperture exposures and, you know, shutter angle or shutter speed exposures. Being in a gaming engine, we're not really constrained by those sorts of things, so it's up to you if you want to work with those values or not. So now I've turned off auto exposure, and anywhere I move around the level, it doesn't change the exposure. That eye adaptation, that brightening doesn't happen. Another thing that you might want to turn off, actually not might, I would say that you do want to turn off, it is in the, where's this? It's easier just to type it in, type in tone for tone curve, and change the tone curve from 1 to 0. The tone curve is Unreal giving it an Unreal look to it. If you want your, in this case, our still from our video footage to look like it does in After Effects or Photoshop, you need to turn the tone curve off in Unreal. If I compare the two here, actually I'm not entirely sure how I can do this on a Mac. How do I do this? Oh, there we go. Okay. I've never used this new system. What's Stage Manager? I never used this except 5 minutes before class. I was like, oh, what's that? That seems neat. So I was going to put the Photoshop version next to the Unreal version. See, the Unreal version's a little bit more saturated and a little bit more contrasty. sometimes that is even more dramatic. And if you turn off the tone curve, now they should be very similar to each other. They look much more similar now. Yeah, they look pretty identical now. If I didn't turn off the tone curve, she's a little darker, especially in the saturated areas of her clothes. So those are two big ones that are questions that always get asked. Why is my image so dark, and why is it so contrasty? This stuff is very important for us today because we're going to be doing the compositing in Unreal. Eventually, when we start to circle back and do the compositing in After Effects, maybe it doesn't matter how good it looks here because it's kind of just a placeholder until we go back to After Effects and put our final picture in there, you know? But if we're going to do everything in Unreal, it needs to look good in Unreal. Don't forget to save. All right, so what have we done so far? We've put a camera in our world, we've attached an image plate to it, and we've brought in the texture with the video on it. You might see when you click on your camera, maybe the exposure is not right there. That's okay, because we haven't set it for that camera yet. We just set it for the world. That's something that we can do later before we render out. For our purposes right now, though, we should be feeling pretty all right. So our next step is to start to build this world. And before we take a break, we might as well turn off the auto exposure in the camera itself, too. So when we look at this window, it looks the same. So I'm going to go to exposure here as well. Exposure is in lens. The reason we have to do it is in both is because one camera is the world where we're just kind of moving around and building, and the other is a view through a camera. Eventually we'll be able to just do the one, but for our purposes right now we need to set both of them. So I'm setting the exposure to manual, metering mode manual, exposure compensation. Mine's 9, I don't know what yours is. Should be similar probably. And I'm going to turn the tone curve amount from 1 to 0. Now they look pretty the same. So the world isn't lighting my texture anymore. And we have our camera all set up without any auto exposure. After all that, now we can finally get started. So as soon as you get to this spot, let's go ahead and take 15 minutes, come back at 1:45, and we'll start building the world. Those of you that are having trouble, stick around and I'll try to help you out. Oh wow, you flew outside the world. So just double click something else like sync camera here. Don't doubt me. So come back at 1:45 and we will keep building this world. Nope, not on the projector, and they're on the computer though. Yeah. All right, we're gonna jump back in, start building this world. I want to start by just showing you maybe a quality of life sort of feature when working with cameras in Unreal. When you click on a camera in Unreal, you get this little pop-up down here. I already showed you about the pin, how you can click the pin and it will pin it there. So even if you click off the camera, this window will still stay popped up. This window can be a little annoying though, because it takes up so much of your screen when you're working. You know, how do I build and keep this up at the same time? Let me show you maybe a better way to go about things. If you go up to the 3 lines icon in the top left, and you click that, and you go down to the bottom where it says layouts, here you can have many more viewports than just the single one. This is personal preference, but I'm going to use the 2 vertical panes right here and click this. See, this is going to give me 2 windows that aren't locked together necessarily right now. What I want to do is I'm going to make one of these my editor camera, which is called your perspective camera in 3D, and I'm going to make the other one my camera, my cinema camera actor looking through the camera. So I'm going to take this window right here, and if I go up to this window, or this little icon where it says perspective, it's where you can change the camera of the viewport. And I only have one camera in my scene right now, so I'm just going to click this one. And you should see that it takes over this camera. So now I can just maybe put that a little bit smaller and just keep that there. Yeah, I have some black space, maybe that's wasted, but now I can keep editing over here and just keep this up on the screen at the same time. This would be another place to suggest getting a second monitor. Have all of your stuff on one monitor, have the clean view on the other monitor. You don't even want to ask about my monitor setup. I have too many monitors. It's crazy. Right, so this camera view right here, it could be a lot of weird stuff. Yours might look like this, which is a top view, which is actually incredibly useful to look at things in wireframe. If you're in 3D, if you know 3D, you know this is how things work. But just change it to either the camera or perspective. So now I have like a working window on my left and the camera view on my right. And again, this is personal preference. Maybe you don't need that. It's fine. All right, well, let's start to build. Again, this is freestyling here a little bit, so I'm not entirely sure where we're going to end up, but that's okay. So I'm going to go into my asteroid ore folder. We have some asteroids here. Oh, I also have a dinosaur here from last week. So I could make like a dinosaur graveyard with pumpkins in space with all these assets. Ooh, such opportunity. Well, anyways, I'm going to get some asteroids. Not time. And if you don't want to do the same stuff that I'm doing, then you don't have to. I'm going to get some asteroids and I'm going to put them in my world. And check it out. As I move it in my left view, it moves in the right view, right? Because it's in front of the camera. So I can start to compose a scene. Start to think about foreground and background. Maybe I want this one to be really close to the camera and eventually be out of focus. I also kind of want those blue things to glow a little bit. I'm not sure if I can do that. Be cool though. Maybe I want another one. Maybe I'll put a yellow one in too, but this one I want behind them, so you know, when it's behind the plane, it's behind them. They block it, so I just move it physically behind them. If I look at my scene from the left, sitting right above my camera, I can see how these things kind of line up, and I can even fly through them. If I look at it from the side, you can see I have two pieces in the foreground here, and I have two pieces in the background. I have this yellow star field too, which I want to do something with. If you're not using the place actors window right now, just shrink it down. Taking up a lot of room. Don't forget to save. Sure.
Of
course.
I place them in my operating system.
Sure.
But I want to give the line texture color
It is. It's not easy. This is you're using a landscape, so the way that landscapes work is you should have the ability to grass and snow and rocks and all that sort of stuff. None of that is set up for you by default. Do it. Without learning all of that stuff. You fake it by bringing in some other sort of assets from other things, possibly. But go back to that the landscape. It's cool. So essentially what's supposed to be here is the sculpt is designing mountains and valleys and that sort of stuff. Paint allows you to paint textures, but there's no textures on here. So if you want to paint grass, you put grass, and then you paint grass. None of that stuff is set up. So in the default now, it's just not very good.
Can I like pull in some texture?
Included in the default landscape. The easiest way to do it would be to find some sort of asset with a ground that you like and drag that mesh into the world. Making your own landscape like this from scratch is great and super aspirational, but tedious to do, and you have to learn how to construct what's called landscape material. There might be some useless classes. Some of the assets that have huge meshes and mountains and stuff that already have materials. You're painting the materials on the landscape is something that's super common, but yeah. Also, landscapes are usually great for super big worlds, but they don't look super great for really close up stuff. It's better to use meshes in that case, like meshes of actually the ground or the rocks. If that makes sense. So,
I think I'm still unable to import assets. Something like this. just copying them into the existing folder where it should copy. Just right here. That's how that happens. It should pop up. Is this the right project?
I think it's easy.
Oh, okay.
We're not doing.
Yeah, now they're.
So I'm gonna keep working on mine. So I'm happy with the asteroid placement, but I want to get that hyperspace star field idea going on. And I have a question for you all. If the goal was to get what happened to my project? If the goal was to get, oh no. Replace footage. Spicy footage. Yeah, if the goal was to get like this hyperspace streak style sort of thing, how could we do that? Well, the way that we've looked at in class would be look for it in the marketplace because we don't know how to make anything of our own. Let's go shopping, right? It's a fairly simple thing though. It's just a bunch of extruded lines. How could we make something like that? There's a lot of different ways. Anybody have any ideas? What if I took like some cylinders?
Stretch them out.
Stretch them out. I need a lot of cylinders, right? It's not coming out of his head now. But what if I stretched it out and made it a little bit more skinny? But now I don't have any material on it. What material could I use? I'll show you how to create a custom material really quick using nothing but math. Check this out. So I'm gonna make a new material from scratch. So the add green button, and this is a general Unreal thing, not a SVA mixed reality filmmaking thing. This is just an Unreal 101 sort of thing. So add material. You can make materials that aren't photographic at all. They don't have textures. They're just math. So I'm going to call this just emissive. Yeah, just M_emissive. So if I put this on my cylinder, nothing exciting happens yet because I haven't done anything with it. And I open it up and there's nothing here. Oh my gosh, look at all this, just sheer possibility here. So I have some things that I can manipulate that we've played around with. Base color, emissive color. If I plug a number into emissive color, I can make it white. If I right click here and get what's called a constant, which is just a number, and I put a 1 here, and I put it in emissive color, look, now I have a white circle. If I change this 1 from a 1 to a 0, now it's black, right? Very exciting. We're doing math here. So, at which point do you want me to go back?
Where you got the square.
The green square?
Yeah.
Sure. So, this is what an empty material starts with, nothing in it, right? So, there's a whole list of things that you can either get from the palette menu over here on the right, or you can just right click and you'll get a huge list of stuff. It's very intimidating. But there's these really simple things called constants, which actually I think keyboard shortcut is 1. Yeah, if you just hold down 1 and left click, you'll get a constant that pops up. Otherwise, you can right click and just type in constant. There's other types of constants too, but we're just doing 1. And I just connect this to emissive color. So 0 is black. If I change this value from 0 to 1, it should turn to white. If I change this from 1 to 1,000, what do you think is going to happen? The emissive color is no longer 1, it is 1,000. What's it going to look like? Guesses? Very bright. Ooh, looking pretty, right? That's cool, but I want colors. So there's these other things called vector parameters. Vectors are 3 things. In our case, we're talking about color. So RGB, vector parameters. And to complete this class, you don't really need to know any of this. I'm just showing you because I think it's neat. So vector parameter. So I'm going to take the vector parameter and plug it into emissive color instead. And this is basically orphaned now. So same thing, it's black, but now I have a color palette. If I click here, I can make this white, I could make this pink, whatever color I wanted, right? It's controlling 3 vectors, R, G, and B. Different varying amounts, making any color in the rainbow, right? It's not super bright though. So if I wanted like this bright pink, that's cool. And if I click save and go back to my world, it'll be pink, but it's not really glowing, right? Actually, maybe I make it green so it's a little bit more noticeable on the background. So how could I get this sucker to glow? Any ideas? I already did it, but for white.
Add the 1 square to the other square.
Not add,
Connect them.
but multiply. So I'm going to take these numbers, which are actually quite small, right? 0.2, 0.8, 0, blues, and I'm going to multiply them by 1,000. Alternatively, I could make these numbers, like I could put 200 in there, 80, and 0, but that's a little bit cumbersome to do. So instead, I'm just going to do more math. And I'm going to get a multiply node. So right click, multiply. There's 2 values here. 2 inputs, 1 output. A gets multiplied by B. So if I look at this in the window now, multiplying by 1, so the values are the same. If I multiply this by 10, they should get a little brighter. If I multiply it by 1,000, they should get even brighter. If I multiply it by 1,000,000, it should get even brighter. If I click save now, it should just be an overwhelming explosion of color. Whoa, yeah. I know this is art school, so we don't talk about math very much, but I think this is pretty cool. Maybe a little excessive on the number there. Oops. Well, that's starting to look a little bit cooler now, right? Now, you could do this for everything. I could start to put these cylinders all over the map, but then I'd need to make a material for every single one. That's perfectly fine. That's one way that we could do something like this. It's not a wrong answer or anything. Actually looks kind of neat. Need to make these a little bit longer though, and maybe tilt them in their axis of travel. Let's rotate these a little bit. They need to go back to infinity in the distance, but they're not long enough yet. So I'll make them longer. Really long. I don't like how that one's in front of her though. Also, something like this should be behind the asteroids rather than in front of it. So something like this could give you a cool effect. But that's not how I originally did it. I did it in a much simpler way. Although that looks pretty neat actually. I'm not happy with the color exactly, but still a neat idea. Especially if it was moving and the camera was kind of rotating slightly. Could be neat. I actually did it using just a material. Oops, let me show you. I created this texture right here in Photoshop. Just a bunch of lines in Photoshop. Pretty simple, right? All the colors that I wanted. And I just put it on alpha. I didn't include this texture in your pack because I wanted you to make your own. Could be anything. It could be shapes of whatever you wanted. It could be text. It could be graphics. And I exported that and I brought it into Unreal. Oops, what happened to my texture? I brought it into Unreal as a PNG with transparency. I created a material for it, which I'm not sure why this disappeared. I think it's because I didn't save. And just like we did before, did the emissive color and opacity to cut it out. You see where this is going, how we're starting to get a tunnel here? Look at that. Pretty done, right? Except I want it to be a little bit brighter, so I need to multiply it. Now it's a little brighter. It's a little glowy now. And if I got rid of these other cylinders, I might just hide them right now. Visible off. If I got rid of these other cylinders, and I just made one big giant cylinder and put that graphic on them, or that material on them, I really stretch out the cylinder. I mean, you don't have to keep dragging with your mouse. You can always go over to the details panel and just change the numbers here. kind of arrange it in their direction of travel. No, I might want to duplicate it so there's more. Now it's starting to look a little bit better. But that asteroid should really be on the other side of it. So I'm actually inside of it now in my one camera. Just thinking about simple ways to do things like this star field. It's just lines on a texture that's stretched out on a cylinder. And I could make it more glowy because I built this material. It's really going to come together when I start to mess around with the camera settings, depth of field and stuff. So I'm going to go into my camera now and start to play around with the focus. We looked at this a little bit last week. If you click on your camera, this is any camera in Unreal, and you look at the focus settings, you can set the focus distance. If you click on Draw Debug Focus Plane, it's going to draw, see this little purple box back here? It's going to draw basically where you're focusing at. And you can drag this number to tell it where you want it to focus at. I'm going to drag this forward. I want it to focus on them right there. Makes the most sense. I'm going to click off, drag debug focus plane, turn that off so I don't see it anymore. I'll go down to aperture and change this to a low number since I want it to be low depth of field. Oh, it brightened everything up. Brighten everything up because it's controlling my exposure. If you find that it brightens everything up, it's because an exposure on the camera, you have this checked, apply physical camera exposure. So I'm going to uncheck this in that sense. You need to uncheck both of those boxes. Apply physical camera exposure. If you don't want aperture to actually control exposure in the world. Actually seems like it's still controlling it. Maybe because it's doing it in the post-process volume too. Let's see. New. Click back on my camera. Must just have to change my exposure compensation and lower it back down. You can see now the foreground's out of focus a little bit. I'm going to keep playing around with that focus. I'm going to try to do as tiny of an aperture as I can. The cool thing with this too, if I go into lens settings, I can set the minimum and maximum f-stop you know, with actual photography and lenses, we're kind of stuck based off of the laws of physics and how small an aperture can be. I'm not even entirely sure what the fastest lens is in the world. I've seen like 0.8s before. But if I made this 0.01 minimum f-stop, in Unreal Engine we can have an aperture of 0.01. And that's perfectly fine. It gets a little bit hot again, so I'm going to change the exposure compensation. And now the foreground's really out of focus, starting to come together a little bit. In the camera as well, I can play around with bloom. Bloom is the glowy from emissive sources. I love me some bloom. I'm going to change the intensity of the bloom, crank it up a little bit. Oh yeah, look at that. You're slightly oversaturated, but I might go back in and change the emissive, lower it down a little bit. I'll take it back up 20. Other things you can add in here are lens flares. You can do color grading in here in Unreal. Actually don't really like the warm default color that came with this sky in the background. So I'm going to go into the space sphere, the asset that I first dragged in here, and I'm going to try to see if I can change the color of the sun. Maybe just something more cool. Cool in temperature. I also changed the background of the gas in the background to something more cool. Maybe I'll add some point lights next to these asteroids to actually give them more of a color. Like a red to this one. Add a blue light to this other one. Oh no, I accidentally moved my camera outside of it. I think that's something I can undo either. Whoopsies. Yeah, be careful when you're clicked on your camera because you could pilot it somewhere that you don't want to. Bummer. If you're worried about moving your camera, you can always lock actors by right-clicking on them in the outliner. And then if you go down to, what is it, transform? Yeah, transform, lock actor movement. It will lock it from moving. Kind of fun.
But if you didn't know. Change the picking to one. So if you multiply any color by a number that's high, it will all turn white. I think you just multiplied it by too big of a number. It's just not showing the one below. Is it in on it? Do it not on solid, do it on a ball. What if you actually put it, save it, and put it on something in the world? Yeah. Save it as, you overwrote one of the defaults. Double click that again? Maybe that's why. Let's just create a new one. So close that down. The content of add into. Back to. crazy. Same thing? Which one is this one? Yeah, because I put. Oh, it's not missing. We went to New Mexico, we're fine. I'm sure it's something that turned off. Who knows? I would save and restart the program. See what seems like a bug. That's blowing. This is blowing. I'm not sure why this one's not blowing.
How do you get that to move?
Click on your camera, you scroll down. Actually scroll up. All the way to the top. And focus settings. You say use the debug plane, which is like your focal plane, and you can drag that big number above it. So it makes sense to focus on them because they're in sharp focus. Then you can scroll down to your actually lens settings then, or there's your aperture. When you change your aperture, you're gonna have to adjust that exposure compensation.
Okay.
So this is by itself. You need a new node called multiply. Actually, we don't need this box anymore because it has value here. And you could connect this. It's the same thing.
Cool. So today we did some more world building, but also with some more focus on compositing in Unreal Engine itself for our final product. Going forward, we're going to do video, although the difference between a still picture and video, it's essentially the same thing. I think if this was moving right now, it would pretty much be the same thing, right? We're building a world around it. It's just that they would be moving. We're going to be bringing in moving images. We're also going to look at keying in After Effects to be able to key things out from green screen, which is a big part of this class. But this is really the foundation of what we're going to do in here, building a world around some sort of content that was photographed. So in our cases today, we could output this. We could go to the three lines in the top left, high resolution screenshot. We could output this. If I don't crash it. Oh no, it might crash it because I did full screen. Didn't crash. So now you could take this back into Photoshop or something, since it's a photo, and you could tweak it more if you wanted to. This is a fairly high resolution output. This is 100% right here. At a certain point, you can't export a higher resolution because the textures themselves start to break down, but looks pretty all right. No, maybe I'd want to add some more contrast, darken the blacks. Maybe not saturate anymore, but maybe pop a vignette on it or something. Oops, not that, but pop a vignette on it. not what I wanted to do. That's kind of fun. Too big. So your assignment for next week is to do something similar with an image of your own. Back at the syllabus. So we ran out of time to do this, render out a foreground and background map of your scene. If you want to look into that, of how to do it, you're welcome to, but you don't need to separate them for this. I'll show you how to do that next class. You just want to export it as one image and then do a little bit of polish in Photoshop or something like that. And then that's your image. Post it to your documentation blog. Okay? You don't need the foreground or background matte. Actually, I'll go ahead and erase that right now. All right, that's it. Questions? So next week we're going to bring in media into Unreal, media being video. We'll look at using the sequencer in Unreal. The sequencer in Unreal is sort of like the timeline you add keyframes to and do animation and such. So we'll look at sequencer, and we'll also bring in some media. This class today is really kind of the last basic Unreal class. Obviously, we'll go over things as we need to do the things we have to in class. But from here on out, we kind of just continue to build worlds and put our footage into those worlds. Huh? Hopefully this demo finished or actually recorded, and I'll upload it tonight. I have to put it together, unfortunately, because this place doesn't have microphones. But I'll let you know. I'll post it on Canvas if you need it.